Welcome to Quiz Cues. This is amazing. Are you ready to play Cluephoria? Today we're playing the second edition of Do You Remember? Guess the 33 epic news headlines from the 90s with just 3 clues. Try to guess the answer as clues are revealed one by one. Question 1 is on its way. If you like these quizzes and want to see more, please subscribe. It encourages me to continuously create new content for your enjoyment. Thank you. Are you ready? Let's go! Do you remember this headline from February 11th, 1990? I was a global headline that turned a nation's darkest chapter into a day of hope. My central figure had become the world's most famous prisoner while still behind bars. My central figure would share the Nobel Peace Prize just 3 years after his first steps of freedom. Nelson Mandela walks free. South Africa's most famous political prisoner walked free after decades of injustice, turning a nation's darkest chapter into a day of hope. The beloved leader had become a global symbol of resistance while still behind bars, and he would share the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize with his nation's president. Do you remember this headline from April 24th, 1990? I was a headline that sent a massive new eye into orbit to peer deeper into the cosmos than ever before. My mission was to look backward through time toward the very birth of the universe itself. I was named for the astronomer who first proved that the entire universe is constantly expanding. Hubble telescope blasts into orbit. A revolutionary orbital observatory was launched, named in honor of Edwin Hubble, the astronomer whose 1929 discovery of galactic redshift proved the universe is constantly expanding. The project was conceived by Lyman Spitzer Jr. in 1946, and after NASA won congressional funding approval in 1977, the final price tag reached roughly $1.5 billion by launch day. Do you remember this headline from October 3rd, 1990? I was a headline that ended decades of division and made 2 nations whole again. My eastern half had held its first free elections just months earlier, sweeping a pro-democracy alliance into power. My larger western half had just won the World Cup for the 3rd time, giving my people a sporting unity months before the political one. German reunification. A European nation split by Allied occupation zones after World War II became whole again when its eastern half held free elections and formally joined its western partner. West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl's bold diplomacy sealed the 1990 unification, formalized by the 2+4 Treaty, signed in Moscow just weeks earlier. Do you remember this headline from August 6, 1991? I was a headline that gave the world a revolutionary new way to share knowledge. My very first page existed only to explain what I was and how to use me. My inventor's boss once called my original proposal vague but exciting before approving it. World Wide Web. First website goes live. The first web page went live from a European physics laboratory on this date, released to the world without patents or fees. Its creator was Tim Berners-Lee, and his supervisor's handwritten note calling the original 1989 proposal vague but exciting became one of technology's most famous endorsements. Do you remember this headline from May 22nd, 1992? I was a headline that marked the end of an era for a beloved TV institution that had become part of America's nightly routine. My star's entrance was heralded by a booming voice that had introduced him thousands of times over the years. My star's final words were a simple, heartfelt goodnight after a monologue that had opened over 4,000 broadcasts. Johnny Carson's final Tonight Show, the beloved late-night host's final broadcast, was introduced by Ed McMahon, the booming voice that had announced him since his very first night behind the desk, which started on October 1st, 1962. The Nebraska-born entertainer had gotten his start as a teenage magician called the Great Carson before becoming America's bedtime companion for nearly 30 years. Do you remember this headline from August 8th, 1992? I was a headline about a team so awesome, our opponents asked to pose for photos with us before the games even began. My team's coach had built his reputation leading a bruising bunch known as the Bad Boys. Sports writers joked that my team's bench players alone would have been favored to win the gold. Dream Team wins Olympic gold. The legendary basketball roster that took over the Barcelona Olympic Games in 1992 is widely regarded as the greatest sports team ever assembled. The squad was coached by Chuck Daly and featured 11 future Hall of Famers headlined by the three most popular legends: Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird. Do you remember this headline from February 8th, 1993? I was a headline that introduced tiny stuffed animals designed to flop and pose like real creatures. Each of my creations had a heart-shaped tag and was deliberately underfilled so children could make them curl up in their hands. My creator had actually retired from the plush toy industry years earlier, only to return with a completely new design philosophy. Beanie Babies debut at Toy Fair. A new line of plush creatures debuted at the 1993 New York Toy Fair, introducing a design that broke traditional toy rules by eliminating rigid parts in favor of soft, posable bodies. Their creator, Ty Warner, intentionally limited production and retired designs to create artificial scarcity, which transformed $5 playthings into collector investments worth thousands. Do you remember this headline from May 20th, 1993? I was a headline that ended an era for a beloved sitcom that had run for 11 seasons. My final episode brought back a love interest fans had not seen in years, giving them the reunion they had been waiting for. My show's final line, spoken by the lead actor, was, "Sorry, we're closed." Cheers! Series finale. The beloved sitcom signed off after an 11-year run with an extended finale that drew over 93 million viewers. It reunited Sam Malone with Diane Chambers, the love interest who had departed after season 5. Sam ends the show by responding to a stranger knocking on the door with, "Sorry, we're closed," then turns off the lights and walks out. Do you remember this headline from October 6th, 1993? I was a headline that shocked the sports world when the best player on earth walked away at the absolute peak of his powers. My central figure had just completed a third straight championship season, cementing a dynasty that seemed unstoppable. My central figure announced his decision in a press conference after losing his drive to compete. Michael Jordan retires from basketball. The greatest basketball player of his era stunned the world on October 6, 1993, by announcing he was leaving the sport after winning 3 consecutive titles with the Chicago Bulls. The North Carolina legend had just led his team to a historic three-peat and would later attempt a career in professional baseball before returning to dominate the sport again. Do you remember this headline from May 6, 1994? I was a headline that marked the completion of a massive engineering project decades in the making. My construction had required the largest boring machines ever built, each weighing more than 1,000 tons. My opening ceremony featured 2 heads of state meeting to celebrate the first direct connection between their nations. Channel Tunnel opens. After nearly 2 centuries of proposals dating back to 1802, a massive underground rail project, nicknamed the Channel, was completed in May 1994. Linking Britain and France by rail, Queen Elizabeth II and President François Mitterrand presided over the opening ceremony, and the project ultimately cost roughly £4.5 billion to complete. Do you remember this headline from July 16, 1994? I was a headline about a celestial visitor that had been torn into pieces by gravity and struck its target like a string of pearls. I was the first collision between 2 giant bodies in space that humans had ever been able to watch in real time. I was discovered by a married couple who had spent their careers hunting for asteroids that might threaten Earth. Comet, Shoemaker Levy 9 hits Jupiter. A fragmented comet discovered by Eugene and Carolyn Shoemaker, along with David Levy, slammed into Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, creating explosions larger than Earth itself. The married couple had spent decades searching for near-Earth asteroids, and the impact scars left behind were visible to telescopes for months afterward. Do you remember this headline from July 16, 1995? I was a headline that launched an online store named after the world's largest river. My founder chose my name because he wanted me to become the world's largest of my kind, just like the river I was named for. My very first sale was a science book about artificial intelligence, shipped from my founder's garage in the Pacific Northwest. Amazon.com opens. An online retail venture launched from a garage in Bellevue, Washington, named after the South American River, that carries more water than any other on Earth. The founder was Jeff Bezos, and the first customer ordered Douglas Hofstadter's Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, a book exploring computer models of human thought and creativity. Do you remember this headline from August 24th, 1995? I was a headline that turned a software launch into the most anticipated entertainment event of the summer. My marketing campaign cost hundreds of millions of dollars and featured a legendary rock band's decade-old hit song as my anthem. My launch event featured my founder dancing awkwardly on stage while that same song played on a giant screen behind him. Windows 95 launches. A software launch transformed into the entertainment event of the summer, backed by a marketing campaign costing hundreds of millions of dollars and featuring the Rolling Stones' Start Me Up. Bill Gates danced on stage at the Seattle debut, and the operating system sold over 1 million copies in its first 4 days, while introducing the Start button and taskbar that would define personal computing for decades. Do you remember this headline from September 21st, 1996? I was a headline about America's most famous bachelor finally marrying in secret on a remote island with no press allowed near the ceremony. My bride had built her career at a legendary fashion house known for minimalist elegance, yet the guest list included not a single industry insider. My groom's cousin, a European prince by birth, served as best man at the intimate ceremony. JFK Jr. marries Carolyn Bessette. The groom married a Calvin Klein publicist in a secret ceremony on Cumberland Island, Georgia, with his cousin Prince Anthony Radziwill serving as best man. The couple shielded the event so fiercely that only about 40 guests received invitations 1 week before and were required to sign confidentiality agreements. Do you remember this headline from November 1st, 1996? I was a headline that marked the end of a bitter industry war between rival technology camps. My creation required 2 competing design philosophies to merge into a single standard after years of expensive deadlock. One of the very first major movies available in my format was a hit thriller about a man on the run, wrongly accused of his wife's murder. DVD format debuts. A new optical disc format arrived in Japan, offering the same compact size as a music CD, while storing enough data for a full-length feature film. The format was born when Toshiba and Warner Bros. Super Density Camp merged with Sony and Philips multimedia CD design. One of the earliest major Hollywood titles released was The Fugitive, the 1993 Harrison Ford thriller about a man wrongly accused of murder. Do you remember this headline from February 23rd, 1997? I was a headline that revealed scientists had created a new mammal from an adult cell, proving that life could be copied from fully grown tissue. My creation was unveiled at a research institute in Scotland, and my name paid tribute to a famous American entertainer. My creator later admitted my name was chosen because the cell that started me came from a specific part of an adult body, and he couldn't resist the pun. Dolly the sheep cloning announced. A groundbreaking scientific breakthrough revealed that researchers at the Roslin Institute in Scotland had created a new mammal from an adult cell. The lead scientist was Ian Wilmut, who named the creation after Dolly Parton, because the original cell came from a mammary gland. The animal was born in July 1996, nearly 7 months before her existence was revealed to the world. Do you remember this headline from April 13th, 1997? I was a headline that introduced a new champion who claimed his first major victory with a dominant performance at a celebrated spring tournament. My winner had been a television prodigy as a child, appearing on national talk shows with a golf club before he was old enough to drive. My winner's father had served in an elite special forces unit and later became the only coach his son would ever need. Tiger Woods wins Masters. A new champion claimed his first major title by a record 12 strokes, becoming the youngest winner ever at 21, and the first person of Asian or African heritage to capture a major championship. The victor's father, Earl, had served as a Green Beret in Vietnam before teaching his son the game, and the champion had already won 3 consecutive U.S. amateur titles before turning professional less than a year earlier. Do you remember this headline from May 11th, 1997? I was a headline that marked the first time a machine defeated the reigning champion of a centuries-old strategy game. My victor was a supercomputer that had lost a close contest to the same opponent 1 year earlier, prompting a high-stakes rematch. The defeated champion later accused my victor of receiving human help, claiming he saw evidence of genuine intelligence behind its most surprising moves. Deep Blue beats Kasparov. A supercomputer made history by defeating the reigning world champion of chess in a high-stakes rematch. The machine was capable of evaluating 200 million positions per second, and the losing player later accused IBM of human assistance, claiming he had seen evidence of genuine intelligence behind its most surprising moves. Do you remember this headline from June 26, 1997? I was a headline that introduced a children's book about an orphan who discovered he had a secret destiny waiting for him on his 11th birthday. My author was a struggling single mother who wrote much of my manuscript in Edinburgh cafes while her baby slept beside her. My original title in America was changed because my publisher feared children would not understand the word philosopher. Harry Potter first book published. A children's book about an orphan boy who discovers a hidden magical world was published in London as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, though American publishers changed the title to Sorcerer's Stone because they feared children would not understand the original word. The author was J.K. Rowling, whose manuscript had been rejected by 12 publishers before Bloomsbury finally accepted it. Do you remember this headline from July 1st, 1997? I was a headline that ended more than a century and a half of colonial rule at the stroke of midnight. My departing governor sailed away aboard a royal yacht that had once carried a famous queen around the world. My incoming military forces crossed the border at precisely midnight while a torrential downpour soaked the official ceremony. Hong Kong handover. A historic transfer of sovereignty ended 156 years of British rule and returned the territory to China under a 1984 agreement that resolved the expiring 99-year lease on the new territories. The departing governor was Chris Patton, who sailed away aboard the royal yacht Britannia, and the incoming forces of the People's Liberation Army crossed the border in a torrential downpour that soaked the official handover ceremony. Do you remember this headline from July 4th, 1997? I was a headline that celebrated a spacecraft landing on a national holiday, bouncing to a stop on giant airbags after a fiery descent. My mission deployed a tiny rover, the first wheeled vehicle to roll across another planet in nearly a quarter century. My rover was named after a 19th century African-American woman who had escaped slavery and become a famous abolitionist and preacher. Mars Pathfinder lands. A spacecraft bounced to a landing on giant airbags during the US 4th of July holiday, deploying the first wheeled explorer on another planet in nearly 25 years. The rover was named after Sojourner Truth, the escaped slave who became a celebrated abolitionist, and the mission sent back more than 16,000 photographs from the red planet's surface. Do you remember this headline from December 19th, 1997? I was a headline that introduced the most expensive film ever made, directed by a filmmaker obsessed with historical accuracy. My studio was so convinced I would fail that they split my massive budget with a rival studio just to limit their potential losses. My signature theme song became one of the best-selling singles of all time, spending 2 weeks at #1 and winning the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Titanic opens in theaters. The most expensive film in history opened after director James Cameron personally dove to the real wreck site 33 times to ensure historical accuracy. The film's love theme was My Heart Will Go On, performed by Celine Dion, and it became one of the best-selling singles ever, while helping the film become the first to gross over $1 billion worldwide. Do you remember this headline from March 27th, 1998? I was a headline about a new medication that had been developed for heart patients, but an unexpected side effect became the main event. My creators were a research team in England who spent years studying my effects on blood flow before realizing my true value lay in an entirely different part of the body. My unexpected side effect was first noticed by Welsh coal miners who were volunteering to test the heart medication. Viagra FDA approved. A pharmaceutical breakthrough, originally intended for heart patients, was approved after researchers discovered its unexpected side effect was more valuable than the original purpose. The compound was first developed by a Pfizer team in Kent, England, and its unexpected properties were first noticed by Welsh coal miners, who were volunteering to test what was supposed to be an angina treatment before it became the fastest-selling prescription drug in history. Do you remember this headline from May 14th, 1998? I was a headline that marked the end of a sitcom that had defined the 1990s, drawing over 76 million viewers for my final broadcast. My co-creator had famously quit the show 2 seasons earlier, convinced he was creatively spent, yet he returned to write and direct my final episode alone. My final episode was so valuable that a single 30-second commercial during my broadcast cost advertisers nearly $2 million. Seinfeld finale airs. A beloved New York sitcom signed off after 9 seasons, with an extended finale that put its 4 leads on trial for violating a Good Samaritan law. Co-creator Larry David returned to write the episode, his only return after quitting as showrunner 2 years earlier, while Jerry Seinfeld turned down NBC's offer of $5 million per episode to do a 10th season. Do you remember this headline from June 14th, 1998? I was a headline that captured a dramatic final moment victory in a championship game, sending a packed arena into absolute bedlam. My hero had faced the exact same opponent in back-to-back championship series, a rare rematch that fueled the rivalry. My hero had once played a finals game with severe food poisoning, then walked away from the sport forever just months after my moment. Michael Jordan, the last shot. A dynasty's leader cemented his legacy by sinking a jump shot that ended a decade of dominance between the Chicago Bulls and the Utah Jazz. The shooting guard had already collected 5 championship rings in the 1990s before this final campaign, and his final iconic shot came with just 5.2 seconds on the clock after stealing the ball from Karl Malone to win the 6th and final championship of his career. Do you remember this headline from September 4th, 1998? I was a headline about 2 PhD students who launched a new way to organize the exploding internet from a suburban garage. My founders had originally called their project Backrub because it ranked websites by counting how many other pages linked to them. My final name was a misspelling of a mathematical term for the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. Google founded. 2 Stanford computer science students launched a new way to organize the internet from a garage in Menlo Park, California. The founders were Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and their firm's name was a playful misspelling of Google, Googol, the mathematical term for the number 10 raised to the power of 100, or 1 followed by 100 zeros. Do you remember this headline from October 2nd, 1998? I was a headline about a holiday toy craze that flew off shelves faster than stores could restock them. My first shipment sold out so completely that parents were camping outside stores and paying 10 times my retail price by Christmas. My built-in sensors and moving parts were so concerning to defense officials that the Pentagon briefly banned me from their secure buildings. Furby released. A must-have holiday sensation arrived as a small, cuddly electronic pet covered in fur that could gradually learn English over time. The toy was created by Dave Hampton and Caleb Chung, who were inspired by the Tamagotchi craze but wanted a physical, huggable version. Its unique Furbish language drew from fragments of Japanese, Thai, Chinese, and Hebrew that Hampton had collected during his years in the Navy. Do you remember this headline from November 20th, 1998? I was a headline that launched the first piece of humanity's first permanent home in orbit, a project that would eventually grow larger than a football field. I was built by one nation, launched by that same nation, but would soon be joined by a connecting module delivered by a rival superpower. My name means sunrise in Russian, symbolizing the dawn of a new era in international cooperation. First ISS module, Zarya, launched. A Russian-built module blasted off from Kazakhstan to become the first piece of an orbital outpost that would require more than a decade and over 40 missions to fully assemble. The module was originally constructed as a backup for Russia's previous space station, but the United States provided roughly $240 million to repurpose and complete it, keeping the project on schedule when Russia's space program faced financial collapse. Do you remember this headline from January 1st, 1999? I was a headline that introduced a bold economic experiment, asking ancient rivals to share one future. My first 3 years existed only in bank accounts and stock exchanges, as physical bills and coins would not arrive until a later date. My name was borrowed from Greek mythology, taken from a princess who was carried across the sea on the back of a white bull. Euro currency launch. Decades after World War II, European leaders dreamed of binding the continent together so tightly that war would become unthinkable. In the wake of German reunification, 11 nations took one of the boldest steps in modern history. They retired their beloved centuries-old currencies, from the mighty German mark and French franc to the Italian lira, and adopted a single shared currency named after the Greek mythological princess Europa. Do you remember this headline from March 21st, 1999? I was a headline about a crew that completed a journey no one had ever finished before. My vehicle was a capsule barely larger than a closet, heated by propane burners and guided by shifting winds across oceans and continents. My pilot was the grandson of a man who had been the first to reach the stratosphere in a balloon. Breitling Orbiter 3 circles globe non-stop. A Swiss-built capsule touched down in the Egyptian desert after 19 days aloft, completing the first non-stop circumnavigation of Earth by balloon. The pilot was Bertrand Piccard, whose grandfather Auguste had been the first to reach the stratosphere in a balloon and whose father Jacques had plunged to the deepest point of the ocean. The expedition was sponsored by luxury watchmaker Breitling, which had backed 3 previous failed attempts. Do you remember this headline from March 29th, 1999? I was a headline that celebrated a famous stock index crossing a historic threshold for the very first time. My milestone arrived during a frenzy of speculation around young internet companies that had no profits yet. My name combined the surnames of 2 financial journalists who founded a newspaper together, and one of them had originally designed me with just 12 constituents. Dow Jones hits 10,000. A century-old market indicator crossed a historic threshold for the first time, capping a decade of explosive growth fueled by internet speculation. The benchmark was created in 1896 with just 12 stocks by Charles Dow and Edward Jones, founders of the Wall Street Journal, and it had taken 103 years to climb from its original starting point of 40.94. Do you remember this headline from April 18, 1999? I was a headline that marked the end of a career that had shattered every offensive record in my sport, many of which may never be broken. My hero had built a dynasty in a small Canadian city, then was traded to a Sunbelt market, and finished his career in America's biggest media capital. My hero's final point was an assist on a teammate's goal, and after the final buzzer, he took one last solo lap around the ice as the arena cheered. Wayne Gretzky retires. The greatest offensive player in hockey history ended his career as a New York Ranger, hanging up his skates after a final game at Madison Square Garden against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The center's last point was an assist on a goal by teammate Brian Leetch, and he took one last solitary lap around the ice as the arena cheered. Do you remember this headline from December 31st, 1999? I was a headline that warned the world to brace for catastrophe at the stroke of midnight, as a simple date change threatened to crash planes, banks, and power grids. Governments and corporations spent billions of dollars rewriting ancient computer code, even pulling retired programmers out of nursing homes to fix it. The United States alone spent more money preparing for my arrival than it had spent on the entire Apollo moon program. Y2K, Bug Panic, Millennium Eve. A global panic erupted as the world braced for a midnight deadline that threatened to cripple modern life. The United States spent roughly $100 billion preparing for the moment, more than 4 times the cost of the Apollo moon program, and the crisis was so dependent on forgotten computer languages that companies flew elderly COBOL experts out of retirement at premium rates and emergency pay. Did you keep track of your score? Post it in the comments. Thanks for playing Cluephoria. See you in the next game.